Adams, an environmental consultant at Maine Environmental Consulting. Today, I'm excited to share how our team is helping York, Maine develop a climate resilience plan for its coastal environment and community needs. York is a scenic coastal town known for tourism, but it faces rising risks from climate change like flooding, rising seas, and changing weather. My goal is to assist local leaders and businesses in understanding these challenges, prioritizing solutions, and keeping York's economy, especially tourism, strong and sustainable. What is climate change and what causes it to change? Climate is a long-term pattern of weather in a particular area, including temperature, precipitation, humidity, wind, and seasons. Unlike daily weather, climate describes averages and trends over decades or centuries. For example, the Amazon rainforest or southern Florida are tropical climates that feature year-round heat and humidity with frequent rainfall and little temperature variation. Climate is shaped by the Earth's energy balance. It changes when the balance of energy coming from the sun and leaving the Earth, which radiates back into space, shifts. If more heat gets trapped, like by greenhouse gases, the climate can get warmer over time. Let's talk about some of the main factors that influence our Earth's climate. First, there are forcing factors. These are elements that can cause climate to change by disturbing the Earth's energy balance. For example, natural events like volcanic eruptions can cool the planets by blocking sunlight. Changes in the sun's energy also play a role. Additionally, human activities like burning fossil fuels, releasing greenhouse gases, and land use changes such as deforestation and urban development also impact the climate. Now let's look at feedback loops. These are processes that can either accelerate or slow down climate change once it starts. Positive feedbacks amplify changes. Think of melting ice exposing dark ocean water, which then absorbs more heat and leads to even more melting. Negative feedbacks, on the other hand, help maintain a balance. An example of this is increased cloud formation, which can reflect sunlight and help cool the earth. Let's talk about local contributions. Why does this matter for York, Maine? Well, our beautiful coastline, our local tourism, and our natural resources are all vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Understanding how energy use, driving forces, and feedback loops work is essential for our community leaders and businesses to plan effectively for resilience. This means protecting our assets, updating our infrastructures, and supporting the well-being of everyone here. In York, two main activities contribute to climate change. First, using fossil fuels like oil and gas for heating and transportation releases greenhouse gases that trap heat in the atmosphere, warming our climate. As winter becomes milder, we might use less heating, but more air conditioning, which can create a cycle that keeps emissions high. Second, developing land by removing forests and wetlands reduces natural areas that absorb carbon, making it harder for the environment to control emissions and leading to increased local warming. This loss of natural habitat buffers also makes flooding and sea level rise worse, creating even more challenges for land use and community adaptation. Understanding these factors helps us find better ways to protect York now and in the future. What about local climate change? Let's discuss how Maine's weather has really changed over the last century. Looking at the data, York's average temperature has gone up by a little over 3 degrees in the past 100 years, so it's not just a coincidence, it's a consistent increase. This extra warmth means we're experiencing fewer frost days, and our warm seasons are beginning earlier and lasting longer. That impacts our local farms, gardens, and even the type of trees and plants around town. In the 1950s, there were about 5 days annually over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, it's around 15 and expected to reach 30 by the year 2050. More hot days challenge cooling, pose health risks, and strains the electric grid. And it's not just the summers that are changing. Winters are also becoming milder with less snowfall. Forecasters believe we could lose up to 30% of our typical snow. That has a ripple effect, impacting our water supply, local wildlife, and even the businesses that depend on the winter. Nighttime temperatures are rising, reducing relief from heat after sunset. These changes require us to plan, protecting our health, environment, and York's livability regardless of weather. What about environmental impacts? Climate change is already affecting York, Maine, impacting our people, wildlife, and the places we cherish. Take the salt marsh sparrow as an example. This bird can only nest in tidal salt marshes along the East Coast and right here in Maine. Since 1998, its population has fallen by about 87%, leaving fewer than 1,600 birds in the entire state as of 2023. Rising seas, more frequent and severe storms, and increased flooding threatens the sparrow by destroying nests, drowning young birds, and eroding vital marsh areas. A projected 1.6-foot rise in sea levels by 2050 could cause coastal flooding to occur 15 times more often, leading to further nest losses and marsh destruction. If development blocks marshes from migrating inland, between 28% and 57% of Maine's coastal marshes could vanish by 2100. Without action, the salt marsh sparrow might disappear entirely from Maine within the next decade. Currently, this species is listed as endangered in Maine. Conservation efforts in York are urgent to protect these habitats, which are also valuable for tourism, offering opportunities for wildlife viewing, birding, and recreation. As flooding and marsh loss worsen, access, wildlife sightings, and beach usage decline, affecting local tourism and economy. Protecting these ecosystems is essential for both preserving wildlife and sustaining York's community and economic health. Climate change is putting increasing pressure on York County's forest and floodplain plant communities. Rising temperatures, heat waves, and altered rainfall and droughts weaken native trees like cedar and fir, making them more vulnerable to pests such as hemlock woolly. These conditions also favor invasive plants like Japanese knotwood, which outcompete native understory species, leading to a decline in plant diversity. Projections indicate Maine could lose at least 6% of its native plants, approximately 386 species, by the year 2100 if emissions persist. Additionally, fall foliage, an important cultural and tourism asset, is occurring nearly 2 weeks later than in the 1950s due to longer growing season and fewer frost. Old growth forests, which contain less than 1% of Maine's forests, but are crucial for carbon storage and biodiversity, face heightened risk from climate change and invasive species, accelerating changes in forest composition and resilience. These shifts threaten ecosystem services such as soil stability and water quality, as invasive plants can alter soil chemistry and water flow, stressing native species and damaging habitats. Overall, climate change combined with droughts, heat waves, invasive species, and transforming landscapes and reducing biodiversity. Maine's temperatures are expected to rise by 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050 and potentially up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by 2100. What about social impacts? The value of properties in York County at risk from rising seas and flooding exceeds $645 million, highlighting a direct economic threat to residents and local government budgets that rely on property tax revenue. Key public infrastructures such as roads, wells, and stormwater systems faces increased stress and potential failure due to more frequent floods and saltwater intrusion. Rising property insurance premiums and higher costs for climate adaptation also contribute to economic challenges. Insurance rates in coastal York have increased by as much 23% in recent years because of more frequent flooding and extreme weather, placing a direct financial burden on residents and local businesses while also jeopardizing mortgage eligibility and property values. Utility infrastructures, including the power grid and public water systems, is at heightened risk of outages and contamination, necessitating costly upgrades and emergency repairs. Expenses ultimately pass on to taxpayers and service users. York's beaches and coastal neighborhoods are vital to its tourism industry, but they face a serious threat from erosion, flooding, and environmental degradation. An estimated 45% of dry beach area is expected to be lost, impacting local businesses reliant on tourism and leading to potential job losses and closures. Recreational activities, key attractions for visitors, are also at risk, with frequent beach closures due to high bacterial levels and storm erosions occurring several times a year. These issues threaten visitor access, diminish the appeal of York's coastal amenities, and reduce revenue for hotels, restaurants, and recreational operators. Additionally, ongoing flooding, accessibility challenges, and habitat loss are diminishing the appeal of natural recreation spaces, leading to fewer repeat visitors and risking the cultural identity of York's coastal communities. This situation underscores how climate change is transforming these areas both ecologically and economically, emphasizing the urgent need for local government and the tourism sector to act to protect natural resources and community cohesion. Mitigation. York aims to cut greenhouse gases by 50% by the year 2030 and reaching 100% carbon neutrality by the year 2050, aligning with climate goals. The town enhances energy efficiency in public buildings and sets zero carbon standards for new constructions. Upgrades like LEDs and installation heat pumps and renewable energies reduce emissions and costs, protecting residents and tourists, linking energy efforts to York's economic security. All new buildings are encouraged to meet zero carbon standards. Hospitality businesses adopt energy saving designs, renewable systems, and green certifications. Tourism operators offer programs for guests to offset their footprints by making York's tourism sustainable and inviting. York is enhancing climate resilience through updated vulnerability assessments for sea level rise and flooding, and by prioritizing infrastructure upgrades along the York River, supported by resilience grant programs and regional collaborations. Open space conservations by the land trust, such as protecting dunes and marshes, buffers the coast, reduces flooding, and absorbs greenhouse gases, and helps regulate temperature, preserving tourism value. York's partnerships span home retrofits, improving building codes, nature-based solutions like wetland conservation and green infrastructures to manage stormwaters and reduce flood risk. Businesses are relocating at-risk facilities and expanding green spaces, preserving both York's resilience and its appeal as a tourist destination. So let's wrap it up. To conclude by highlighting the main points from York's effort in climate resilience. York faces climate risks like rising temperatures, flooding, and habitat loss, impacting wildlife, infrastructures, and the economy. The town aims to cut greenhouse gases by 50% by the year 2030 and reach carbon neutrality by the year 2050 with energy upgrades and strict standards. Land conservation and wetland restoration help manage floods and sustain tourism. Ongoing adaptation requires infrastructure upgrades, energy efficient buildings, and strong partnerships among governments, land trust, and local businesses. My recommendations include investing in climate solutions, community engagement, expanding collaboration, and inclusive planning for a resilient future. Thank you for your attention and thank you for being a part of the solution. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.